Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday yet again, and that means you have found the Listening with Your Eyes LinkedIn Live and also Facebook and YouTube Live. I am your host, Allison Henderson, and today my very special guest is Dr. J. Kumar. I have been promoting him for weeks. He is the author of Science of a Happy Brain, and he is fantastic. This is definitely one you're going to want to bookmark, take notes on, share with your teams, because he is a brain scientist and has been on the hunt for how we create happier workforces and happier cultures and happier brains. Because and when you read the book, you will discover that creating a happy brain doesn't just happen naturally, because our brains are actually wired to protect us. They are not wired for happiness and joy and all of those things just because. We have to cultivate that ourselves. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Dr. Jay is the director of well-being at Chapman University in California. And so this was pre-recorded because I didn't feel right asking him to wake up and be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 6 a.m. for us to go live. He and I met during the last TEDx Wrigleyville talks this summer. His talk, How to Heal America's Traumatized Brain, is one you'll want to go seek out on the TEDx Wrigleyville site, because it is a fascinating study of how to heal the nation from a psyche perspective, and how to restore American democracy with the divide that we're in. So that would be, highly recommend that you go over there and check that out. I believe in our talk today, he will be mentioning a couple of his LinkedIn courses. He has one that's just about to come out, but there is one now that you can go find called How to Train Your Brain for Happiness. And it has over 200,000 folks have taken his course on LinkedIn, and that's something else that you can find. Of course, look for him on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all of those things, and I will put that link in as well. So without further ado, let's get to this interview.
Well, thank you firstly, thank you, Allison, for this opportunity to speak with you and to share some insights around how we can begin to, like, what I call rehumanize at work and in the world. And so you mentioned my research that I do, the book Science of a Happy Brain. I'm also, I investigate the neuropsychology of trauma. And so this actually is an interesting way to talk about this, because whether we admit it or not, a lot of us have experienced some form of trauma in the past 18 months, whether that is a sense of loss or grief. Let's talk about the loss of connection, the loss of perhaps losing loved ones, the loss of employment or financial, security, you name it, loss of opportunities, loss of not being able to do graduation. So all of these things have affected what I call our social brains. So what's interesting, I think for me as someone who investigates brain science and behavior and begins to apply it into how we humans kind of function in the world and thrive, if you will, a remarkable piece of, I would say, discovery came out in the brain science field in the past maybe 30 years or so. For the longest time, we've always thought the brain is like a rational organ, a cognitive organ, and maybe an emotional organ. But what recently has been discovered, more so than all those things, is that your brain, my brain, everyone human's brain is fundamentally a social organ that necessitates connection, community, cooperation, and collaboration. Why would that be the case? So let's go back to our Stone Age tribe brain, if you are, Stone Age, time when we're like, life was pretty harsh. Going back, 10,000 years ago or so, life was pretty brutal, right? The name of the game was survival. Make it one more day, you got to live. You're pretty darn happy, right? So imagine, would your chances for survival increase if you had one other able-bodied person with you that you trusted? Well, the answer is probably yes, right? But imagine you had like 5 or like 10 or like, 50 people around you that began to, look out for your best interest, and you were looking out for their collective interest. So you now have the basis of what we call tribe. So a phrase I use in the book, Science of Happy Brains, and my motto: to socialize is to survive, but to tribe is to thrive. And this really is it. We need tribe. And so for many of us over the past 18 months, and even maybe today, that tribe has either we've been disconnected from that tribe, we have been maybe isolated from that tribe. And what's really interesting, someone shared this with me the other day, the isolation has led to desolation in some way.
Wow. I love that.
So the isolation that we've experienced has led to our desolation. Our brains literally have what you may call like how muscles atrophy when you don't use them. So we can literally, I'm saying literally, this is not metaphor, this is literal. Your brains literally, that part of your brain that necessitates and requires social connection has atrophied or has somehow been undernourished, in some way.
Wow, everybody. There were so many great nuggets in that first segment. Just to recap a couple of those, that our brains are actually social organs. And that makes a lot of sense then for why we felt so alone during this remote work period, why Zoom just wasn't enough, because the energy, the feeling of being together and collaborating in a room was really lost during that, and that our brains actually atrophied. And I think maybe there should be some studies done even more so than on the adults, but on the children that were isolated for that entire time as well, and how they dealt with and had to deal with that social uh, detriment that was going on, that their very formative years, particularly those uh, adolescent years, that middle school age where you're figuring things out and who your tribe is and who your tribe's not. We lost that. And I know my own kids were feeling like they didn't get the chance to make new friends. I had a freshman going through during the COVID, and he said, "Mom, I haven't really made any new friends because I don't know anybody, and we don't get to talk in the classroom, and there's not that in between time, what I call like drive-by meetings, where you get to just get to know people in short snippets." So this idea of isolation leading to desolation is something that we should keep in mind, because now that we've been in this remote work for so long, we can't forget that those are still tendencies that are going to happen, that the collaboration, that maybe we've done everything that we can to create better meetings, and you've watched my LinkedIn lives, and you've gone to my YouTube channel, and you've watched my tips on how to be better on camera, and you're doing all of those things, but maybe it's still not quite enough for your team. And maybe there is a bit of uh, necessity to come back into the office a couple of days a week to plan some meetings. It's part of the reason why people are feeling so good when they finally do get to meet together, or they go to that conference because they've been vaccinated and everybody's vaccinated, and they finally get to see people in person, and how good that feels as things start to open up. All right. The other thing that I wanted to say is, if you are out there and you do have questions, I know Dr. J isn't live, but go ahead and shoot them over to me, and I'll make sure that I get them to him, and maybe, I bring you back the answers next week and things. So don't worry about not asking questions if you have them, or definitely reach out to Dr. J himself. So let's move on to the next segment and see what other magnificent tips we get from Dr. J.
Yeah. So, I think we're living in a world now where we have to accept that virtual connections or virtual, I think interactions are going to be part of the norm. I'm hoping it doesn't become the standard. I hope that it becomes more so, hey, I can't fly out to New York for this meeting. I'm gonna do a Zoom call with you, like where we are right now. I'm in Los Angeles, you're in Chicago. I'm not gonna fly for that kind of thing. So this is great for that. But I think we need to recognize how we can begin strategizing and people's strategies for connections. Be sure to get your daily dose of vitamin S, which is vitamin social. So vitamin S is the idea that we need that nourishment for our social brains and for our happiness, if you will. I study the science of a happy brain. And they discovered, if I can just share one statistic, this is pre-pandemic. A study was done, I think it was 2019, by the American Psychological Association. And they did a meta-analysis of looking at all these different research studies that took place and realized that if you combine the health detriments of smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, stress, etc., it actually doesn't even come, if you add all this together, lack of social connection is a greater source of your longevity, or I think undermines longevity and morbidity and everything more so than smoking, obesity, diet, exercise, lack of combined. So we need that social connection. So one strategy I think we can begin to do is to get out of what I call our, like our Zoom comfort zone, or Zoom zone, if you will. Like a lot of us were like, oh yeah, I can just check with my friend on social media. No, that person you haven't seen in a while, get together and get coffee with them. What's your excuse? Where it's pretty safe now. If you're one-on-one, you can go out in a restaurant, open cafe, have a coffee or a drink with someone you haven't seen in a while. Do that. There's this idea which comes out a lot in my research called psychological safety. Find what is psychologically comfortable for you. So if you can just go out and if you're invited to a party and you're like, hey, is everyone there going to be vaccinated? Are people, is it outside, indoors? What's the case going to be? Just do that. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's nothing wrong with saying no. But I'm also saying, say yes to some things as well. Don't say no to everything.
Right. Find what you can say yes to.
Right.
Now, do you think that also goes into then the work environment? Do you feel like, does it come from management to provide the information, or how would you say, I guess, if someone's sitting there and says, okay, well, I don't want to mandate things for my team. However, right, how do I give them the okay to say no, or how do I empower them to ask the right questions? Is it simply leading by example, or do they really need to kind of set up new protocols for things? Or what are you thinking? Because I know you do a lot of working with businesses and with Fortune 500 companies and stuff. Are you finding they're asking you these questions too?
Yes. Thanks for asking that question. Yes, I am. I do a lot of work with a lot of Fortune 500, 100 companies around this idea. And most recently, I was actually speaking to employees of Google back in July, and the same idea came up. It's this idea, like, how do we begin to give our workforce that safety of knowing what are the protocols, what are the do's and don'ts.
Oh, you've heard me talk about this. What are the protocols and what are the do's and don'ts, right? That if you have not done these things, it is time to get back to doing them. And now there's an extra layer of the do's and don'ts going back to the office versus only the do's and don'ts for your virtual world as well. Great content again in that clip, that you still need your vitamin social. So get out and meet people in smaller groups if you can, in order to feed that part of your brain. And I've heard from people that say, oh, the first 2 weeks going back to work were terrible. All I wanted to do was be back at home. I didn't want to have to get up earlier to get to work on time, or I couldn't just like walk down from the bedroom to the office and my hair is still wet and start work at 8 or 7 or whatever it is. But over time, they got back into it and said, now I am glad that we're back, because I do get to see people and I do get to talk. And I didn't realize how important that really, was to the work environment. So particularly those of you that are thinking of staying remote forever, you're going to need to proactively find ways to do some of that social stuff. Wonderful. That was segment 2, I think. So let's go on to segment number 3, and we'll see what the next piece is all about.
The first thing I say is if you're a company or an HR or in management, the first key is clear communication. It is key. The more clear you can communicate to your workforce, here's what we're going to do, this is going to be key. The second thing is what I call empathetic communication and listening. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So it's going to be maybe, if you're in HR, you're in management, or you're an executive or a boss, really be open that not the policies that you implement are not going to be doable, or they're not going to be manageable or even ideal for the entire employee workforce. There are going to be some people say, I really can't come in 5 days a week because of XYZ reasons, and honor that. I think the other thing is trust. One thing which I think I know I'm doing here, my work at Chapman as role of director of well-being, is really, I think it's important that employers promote and recognize and appreciate all the work and sacrifices that employees in the workforce have done over the past 18 months. Not doing that, I think, is going to be a red flag down the road. If your workforce or employees, your workforce know, hey, my boss or HR, they're really looking out for me. They appreciate me. They see me. They give me a sense of that value, belonging, and engagement. So I will actually make sacrifices in the future. What human beings, especially in the workforce, what they crave most, it's interesting. It's not so much monetary rewards. It's what I call meaning rewards. Is my work meaningful? Am I being appreciated? And don't get me wrong, of course, having that pay raise or salary, that bonus at the end of the year is great. But what goes further on a daily basis is if employees know that they are being appreciated, recognized, and their commitments and the sacrifices they've made haven't been unnoticed.
Okay, here's what I have to say about that. How often do I talk about clear communication, empathy, and trust from the body language piece? And that is the icing on the cake for all of this. Encourage your managers to not only verbalize their appreciation and the trust in the workforce when they're working from home, but they need to mean it. So one, don't just put it in the chat. You need to verbalize it. You need to say it and give appreciation in even a group setting so that other people hear it too. And when you say it, you need to be gesturing in the box. You need to be using this upper body, and you need to be smiling when you say it, because it has to come through as true. If it doesn't come through as honest and true, it's going to come through as lip service, and then you might as well not have said it. So make sure that your body language is in support of that appreciation that you give. And obviously, if you need help with that, you can always reach out to me, and we'll get your managers back to showing empathy and trust and honest communication, even through the screen.
What you're talking about is actually, there's a term that it's called social valence. And this is exactly what we're talking about. So if you're in a Zoom meeting, so everything you just mentioned can be summed up by you kind of define exactly what social valence is. So the idea is that if you're on Zoom, you've got the chat box, rather than typing, I really appreciate you, great work, turn your camera on. It goes so much. If you see that person sharing with a smile on that person's face, and you're like, oh, wow, that person actually looking into the camera, looking and saying, hey, you know what, Deborah, so grateful. I know how crazy busy life has been for you with whatever was going on. It means so much. You actually took the time and helped us out on this project, or whatever the case might be, rather than in the chat box saying, "Great work, Deborah," an email, or even there's no social valence. It goes back to that social brain. The mirror neuron system, all these systems in our brain really are primed for having that ability to see you. And even though, again, two-dimensional screens aren't ideal, but it's still better than having your camera turned off or sending a text message to someone or just doing it in the chat box. This is going to be part of, I think, of our socialization, rehumanization process going forward. It's going to be very important to know that we need to harness this new virtual technology, virtual workspace to our advantage, not have it be something which goes against the grain of millions of years of evolution, but something we can take with us into the future that we can adapt into how our brains evolved as social organs.
All right. Always great stuff and everything he says. I want to make sure before I forget that I'm going to put in the chat here. Hopefully it will show for us. It doesn't seem to be. There it is. So you're going to connect with Dr. J on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram using @DocJKumar is one way to find him. And obviously he is on LinkedIn as well, and you can message him through there. Obviously, when you message any of my guests, you should say, "Hey, I saw you on LinkedIn Live with Allison," and then they'll know to connect with you, right? If you just send them the blanket message from LinkedIn, they're probably not, they may not respond, because I certainly don't respond to everybody that tries to connect to me, because we think you're just out there to sell us something. So if you really do have a comment or question, make sure that you say where you saw Dr. J and do it that way. So I wanted to make sure that I had that up going on in there. So all of those things, right? Appreciation goes a long way. If there's anything that, if you feel like your particular communication has been altered in this remote place, or that you've been reading so many blogs and you're trying to do all the rules that everybody has out there, and you feel like your own authenticity has been marginalized, I encourage you to join me on November 9th. Here's the commercial for today. On November 9th at noon Central, I'm going to be doing a free workshop on this authenticity thing, because I'm going to be starting the True to You program right up there, that little logo. The True to You program will start in January. And for people to kind of try before they buy, this free training is very much what's in this first module. And it's talking about authenticity. It's going to be talking about some of the things that the new research that I'm doing is all about bias, and how our body language biases impact our authentic communication too. So there's going to be a lot of really great stuff coming out soon. And it's a different kind of body language and communication course in January, because it's a small group. You are able to practice on one another, and really we'll get into conversations. I'm super excited about it. If you're interested in that November 9th, just shoot me a message and I will send you the link to register for that training on November 9th. And just keep watching my LinkedIn feed, because I need to start really promoting that more because it's coming up. Okay, we have, I think, one more segment with Dr. J. Let's check it out.
Nothing comes close to the actual in-person connection, that strategy for connection, because something, the reason why so many of us have experienced what's called Zoom fatigue, I call it, virtual vertigo sometimes, where you're just like spinning at what's going on here, right? So this idea, and I think we're going against the grain of how our brains evolved, why it's so jarring for us, why it's so challenging and it's exhausting, because normally if you're in person, your social brain kicks in, you kind of know what's the social valence is of the situation. You pick up on cues. It's so hard sometimes when you're on a two-dimensional screen because that connection is not there. Even worse if your video is turned off and all you're doing is like audio or even just chat box, it's even worse. But the point is, we now can use the brain science of happiness, the science of a happy brain, the book. And also if audience listeners don't know, I do have a online course on LinkedIn Learning, how to train your brain for happiness. And soon we'll have another course called How We Rehumanize at Work and in the World.
Definitely pick up the science of a happy brain. And here's the other caveat that is throughout the book is that your brain was created for survival. It wasn't created for happiness. So you have to work on it. And I think that is what is so like, oh my gosh, it makes absolute sense, but you don't think about it. You don't think about, oh, there's a reason why achieving happiness I love how you say it's the pursuit of happiness. It's not just
the promise. It's not the promise.
Yeah,
pursuit.
It's not going to happen just because. It is something that needs to be cultivated. All right, everybody. That was a really great way to cap things off. You do need to cultivate your happy brain. You do need to go on the pursuit of happiness. It's not going to happen by chance. It's not going to happen just because for some reason you're owed it or something. So take all of this information and, show this to your teams and things. I think the idea of leaving cameras on, of giving appreciation where appreciation is due, of finding ways to meet in person, even if it's tiny bits of one-on-one. As a manager, maybe you arrange with your team, different people to come into the office on different days so that you can sit down with them and you can have some one-on-one time and slowly get back to more normal. And I think this must not have made the cuts when I cut. But one thing that Dr. J said was, I don't call it getting back to normal because there is no such thing as normal. And I think that is very, very true. We can't really think of getting back to normal because the normal that we knew will never be there. And how are you going to create the new normal for your team? How are you going to create a better workforce from all that we have learned over these 18 months? Gosh, it's going to be 2 years here before we know it, that we've learned so much about ourselves. We've learned so much about what we can and can't accomplish, whether it be remote or whether it be in person, and using all of that to move forward and to be better and to communicate more fully. So there you have it. This was your Listening with Your Eyes LinkedIn Live. Don't forget to turn those cameras on and move in your box. If you are interested in that free training on November 9th at noon Central, or reach out to me and I will send you the link to get registered for that. Otherwise, have a wonderful day and we will see you next week at 8 a.m. on Tuesday.